it's BS. There is no such thing as a way a lawyer looks or sounds. You're a lawyer. How do you sound? That's what a lawyer looks and sounds like. Like it's you. If that's who you are, at the end of the day, that's what you need to put out there, because people can tell if you're being inauthentic. And this is a surprising, I think, for a lot of lawyers, new lawyers, people coming over from bigger firms, is that the quality of your legal services isn't all that important. What's more important is the experience that the client has working with you. A lot of lawyers are afraid of, hey, what happens if people know, that I've got sage burning in the background, or, when I'm talking with them on the phone, or things like that, and I get that, because the profession tells us there's this way that you're supposed to come across, that you're supposed to look, that you're supposed to present, and anything that goes against that, we're afraid of being kind of seen as outcasts by the profession.
Welcome to the Illuminating Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Marcia Narayan Weldon, and I'm a lawyer, business strategist, corporate trainer, and executive coach. Each week, I'm going to bring you my favorite entrepreneurs, thought leaders, legal professionals, and other coaches who will inspire, educate, and empower you. Welcome to the Illuminating Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Marcia Narayan Weldon, and I'm a lawyer, business strategist, corporate trainer, and executive coach. Each week, I'm going to bring you my favorite entrepreneurs, thought leaders, legal professionals, and other coaches who will inspire, educate, and empower you. Much less on a podcast or on a forum like LinkedIn. There's some, I just finished a book chapter called Coming Out of the Spiritual Closet from Lawyer to Lightworker, because for a long time when I was on LinkedIn, I was like, I'm going to post about this legal thing and this award and this presentation, this CF. I feel like lawyers are the least likely people to ever talk about spirituality public. Hi, Brad. I'm so happy to see you today. How are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm fantastic. So I'm so excited to talk to you because I feel like we've met on LinkedIn, and I feel that I'm always drawn to your posts because you're a different kind of lawyer. You're a proud lawyer dad. You work with small and solo firms, and you're really open about your spirituality. So I want us to talk about all of those things. But first, what's wrong with modern law practice? I know you've had a podcast and you talk about, and you're the new modern lawyer. What's wrong with modern law practice?
So the big problem is that we're still trying to practice law today here in the 21st century like we did in the 1970s. It's very much billable hour. We focus on how much are you working, how hard are you working. There's these ideas of what a lawyer should be like that we're kind of carrying out from that time period. And if you don't necessarily fit into that mold of what it kind of expected of you, then you're kind of shunned or, kind of put out, whatever. So I think it's really just kind of that throwback to that old way of practicing, and people aren't, and the law practice isn't, or profession isn't really keeping up with the way that modern times are changing.
So give us some examples. What do you think modern law should be versus what it actually is? So if you could design the lawyer of today, or the lawyer of the future, or the law firm of today, or the law firm of the future, what would you say needs to get, what do we need to stop, start, and continue doing when it comes to modern law practice?
So, I mean, the first thing, something I mentioned, was about the billable hour. And I think that the billable hour was probably not great back in the 60s, 70s, or whatever, and it's definitely not great today. It puts a lot of focus on how hard we can work the associates underneath us, as we're partner levels, and it's very hierarchical. So everyone down below us, we're leveraging them in their work. And so we need them to work as much as hard as we can, which is great if you're at the top, but not so much if you're the associates, the junior level partners underneath them, who are working, 2,000, 2,400 hours a year, who are only getting credit really for what they're able to bill. And so things like business development and pro bono, and even just taking time for themselves, there's really no emphasis and really no benefit for them to be able to do that because they're not getting credit for it. So that's one of them. Another one, I think, is just considering the actual needs of the lawyers themselves, of the junior partners, the associates. What do they need? They need time to be able to focus. You need time to to yourself, to be able to work on your mental health, on your physical health, be able to take vacations and things like that. And the practice of law hasn't really been friendly to those sort of things. It's been a lot of here's what we do, work, 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 and that's great, I guess, if you want to churn out, billable hours and things, but not so great for lawyers and their health and things like that. So I mean, those are two things I think I would say need to be changed. I mean, there's others as well. There's a lot of things that we could be doing better. Um, we can be making sure that lawyers feel more able to be themselves, to be authentically themselves out there when they practice, to market themselves that way too.
But
Um,
how do you do that? And how do you take care of I mean, because people have been talking about the death of the billable hour since I've been practicing for 31 years. I've been talking about that for longer than 30 years. It just hasn't
mhm,
changed. When you're dealing with, and I know you coach small law firm owners and others,
mhm.
are your clients, the smaller firms, taking, because I think for the bigger firms, economically, the billable hour is going to make sense for them until they die. As a former in-house lawyer, the billable hour never made any sense to me. It was completely contraindicated because, by the way, I don't think associates necessarily work hard. They just work long. And I'm not saying, by the
Correct.
way, for
Yeah.
those people listening, that you're not working hard, right? What I'm saying is that there's no incentive to work smart. Right? There's an incentive
Hmm.
to work long hours, and there can be incentives, subconscious, to dramatically overbill. And I know when
Yeah.
I was a speed reader, I still am, right? And I slow down for reading legal stuff. But unless I was preparing for a trial, it was really hard for me to get for 2,100 hours because as a litigator, I'm reading cases, but I read them really fast. Clients didn't really have to write much off because like she's so efficient. And so the billable hour is always a penalty for me because, from a bonus perspective, it's going to be really hard for me to get there unless, like I said, I'm preparing for trial or something like that. So the billable hour, I think, helps nobody but the firms. But what
Hmm.
about the smaller firms? Are you seeing that they're able to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more agile with alternative fee arrangements and other things?
Definitely. And I think there's a couple of reasons. First of all, their customers or clients are demanding it. Consumers want
Hmm.
the flat fee. They want something that they know it's gonna their fee is going to be before they get a bill. They don't like surprises, and so they're demanding more upfront pricing from the lawyers. So that's pushing smaller firms to do it because they're the ones helping consumers generally. It's easier for smaller firms to do. You don't have to go through 7 layers of red tape and having 15 different partner
Right.
meetings to try to make something happen. Like if somebody says, "Hey, it's me and my partner over here, law partner, we're going to start doing flat fee work," you can start putting into practice right away, and you don't have to sit and think and go through the process and take a 6-month lead in and do a trial and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff that a bigger firm was. Especially because billable hour is not just a method of billing, but it actually goes to your business model. So when you
Hmm.
stop hourly billing, then the question becomes, okay, if we're not keeping track of the time for clients, how are we looking at the work our attorneys are doing? How do we figure out how we promote, how we compensate
Right.
people? Because we're no longer, assuming we're not keeping
That's our
that time anymore.
metric.
That's not right. That's
Right.
not the metric that's important for the client billing anymore. What are we now going to use for our clients, for attorneys as well? And so it's a lot easier for a smaller firm to make that change to something else than a bigger firm. It's a tugboat versus an ocean liner, which is going to be easier to move. Those small little tugboat or whatever on there doing that.
So when you coach small law firm owners or small law firm partners, what are the biggest things they're coming to you for? What are their pain points, and how might that be different from those at a mid-size or a larger firm?
Um,
Because most people, actually, most lawyers in the country, although lawyers know this, law students probably don't know this, work for smaller firms, right? Most lawyers aren't working for the big, huge mega firms.
Right. Yeah, that's just what we hear of and what are out there. But
Hmm.
no, the majority of lawyers are working in some sort of small firm setting, and I mean most of the things that I see are concerns over um, getting clients. I mean that's usually the number one issue is how we get clients. Well, I need to get clients. Um, from across the board, from junior all the way up to senior level people in smaller firms, is they want to know what they need to do to get clients in the door. How do I get that person to turn into a client that I'm talking with? because these are skills that we don't really learn in law school. It's not a focus
Right.
of legal education, but if you're a small firm lawyer, it's a big part of what you do. I could argue that you actually are more of a salesperson when it comes to getting people in your firm than a lawyer most of the time. Just the amount of how your work kind of has to go and what's contributed to your success in that firm as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the top tips that you have for small firm lawyers? And we're coming into, depending on people listening to this, this will be released in May of 2023, and we're heading into economic headwinds. I don't want to use the R word for recession, right? Economic headwinds. In times like this, how do lawyers need to market differently? How do lawyers need to sell themselves and sell their value differently?
That's it. They need to focus on the value they're providing to their clients, because when consumers of legal services are considering what am I going to spend my dollar on, if things are a little bit tight, if they're uncertain about what how things are going to look in their bank account tomorrow, you need to show that you are going to be able to provide the best value for their dollars. And so that's really what you need to do, is focus on how you're helping them, what benefit they're getting. Like, they don't care about all the diplomas you have or the awards that you get or anything like that. They want to know what is in it for them and how is it going to make their lives better, their legal problems, whatever they're facing, how's it going to make that situation go away or improve. So that's really what you need to look at and focus on.
So, other than ignoring that advice, what are most law firm owners doing wrong? So, we've talked about they're using fee arrangements that don't make sense for the client, and they are not necessarily putting themselves out there to market. And I want to talk to you about how you market yourself in a few minutes. But what are they doing wrong in terms of just the practice of law? Especially the smaller firms that may not have been trained in big law and all the bells and whistles. Some people might be coming out of law school, might say, I've got to set up my own shop, or it's going to be me and a buddy, and they may not know what they're doing. What are some things that might be some of the do's and don'ts for people kind of starting off, or maybe moving from big firms to smaller firms?
So, and this is a surprising, I think, for a lot of lawyers, new lawyers, people coming over from bigger firms, is that the quality of your legal services isn't all that important. What's more important is the experience that the client has working with you. If they think that you
Wow.
care about what their issue is, if they think that you are doing what you can to help them, that you're putting effort, whether or not it's hours and hours or just the 5 minutes you're talking with them, if they feel like you're really there
Hmm.
working on their behalf, they're gonna feel satisfaction. They're gonna feel happy with what you're doing. They don't need the A+ lawyering necessarily. Like, I think clients come to you and they want to win. They've got something they want you to accomplish for them. But at the end of the day, what's really important, what they will remember, is what the experience was like for them. How did they feel working with you, regardless of the outcome? Like, down the road a couple of years, they'll forget how that went. What they will remember
Hmm.
is, what, that lawyer treated me like a real person. They didn't talk down to me. It was really easy to work with them. Anytime I had questions, I could get a hold of them. That's what they're going to remember. Not, did we win? Did I get $200 more here or there, or how that turned out for
Right.
me?
Now, I think, we talked about putting yourself out there, and whether you're in a big firm or a small firm, everybody's got to market, everybody's got to brand themselves. And I think
Yep.
sometimes lawyers think that's unseemly. Like, look, we are professionals. We're very elevated. We're not marketers, but it's called business development, right? So,
Mhm.
what is it that lawyers are doing wrong? And what are some of the best business development tips that you can give? So, what are the people that are doing it right? What sets them apart? And then, what are
So
most people doing wrong?
yeah, so what people do wrong is that they try to make it about themselves. So they try to go and they say, well, I'm this great lawyer. I do great legal work. See the awards that I've won. I drive great contracts. And they really focus on what we just talked about, the quality of legal services. And for the most, again, clients assume a minimum level of competency. They assume that they're going to get
Hmm.
good, whatever that means to them, good legal services. So what distinguishes you is the way that you make them feel and that you actually talk to them and their needs. So if you want to be able to be successful when it comes to business development, you need to focus on the client. You need to figure out what it is that they specifically need, what it is that their concerns are, what their pain points are. How can you talk to those specific points? Show how you're going to resolve that issue. Um, and one of the great ways to do that too is being authentic when you're coming across. One thing that I know a lot of lawyers do is they've got this idea. I think we kind of perpetuate this in the profession,
Mm-hmm.
that there's a way to look professional. There's a way that lawyers are supposed to look or come across or sound or whatever.
Right.
And that's a bit BS. There is no such thing as a way a lawyer looks or sounds. Um, it's you're a lawyer. How do you sound? That's what a lawyer looks and sounds like. Like it's you. And so it's being comfortable to be yourself. It's going out there and maybe not using the most polite of language. Maybe you're throwing some colorful words out there if that's because you're going to attract people who like that authenticity. That's going to draw them into you.
So you are very much yourself and very authentic on social media. How comfortable though do you think most lawyers are, and how do clients respond when lawyers might be too authentic? So you might have the lawyer that is using the colorful language, that is, talking about, and we'll talk about your spirituality. When does a person decide, I don't want to show too much of myself because I might turn off a prospective client? Or does it never matter? And that the client that you turn off was not your ideal client anyway? Because it's very easy to say that in theory, but people have to eat and they've got to pay student loans. So, how do you figure out the line of what level of authenticity do I stop at?
Yeah. So I kind of see it a little bit of as a dial. Um, at
Hmm.
the until you get comfortable being yourself, it's a process of just make gradual changes, putting yourself out there a little bit more, a little bit more. And I think at the end of the day, there really isn't a limit. Like you should never say this is who I am, but I can't say this out there. If you want to use a colorful language or whatever, if that's who you are, at the end of the day, that's what you need to put out there, because people can tell if you're being inauthentic. They're going to say, hey, that person is fake. There's something wrong there, and it's not going to jive well. They're not going to be able to connect with you or whatnot. Um, but I know that a lot of people are afraid of that. A lot of lawyers are afraid of, hey, what happens if people know, that I've got sage burning in the background, or, when I'm talking with them on the phone or things like that, and I get that, because we're getting, the profession tells us there's this way that you're supposed to come across, that you're supposed to look, that you're supposed to present, and anything that goes against that, we're afraid of being kind of seen as outcasts by the profession. And so it's just putting yourself out there a little bit, and then a little bit more and a little bit more, until
Hmm.
you get to the point where you
Right.
just no longer care. You're just saying, you know what, this is me. I'm going to fly my flag, because the people who really are going to resonate with that, the people I'm really going for, my ideal clients, they're going to find me, and they're going to like that, and they're going to love that, and they're going to attach to that.
So it's easier to do that if you own the firm or you're in a smaller firm. What do you say
Mhm.
to those people who are going to big law? And probably the people who are going to resonate with this podcast are lawyers and law students, so they know what I mean by big law. But or you're going to
Mhm.
be working for the government, right? You're going to work for the state
Mhm.
attorney's office. Can you really come bedecked and bejeweled in crystals and that kind of stuff? So I just finished teaching my law students. I'm trying to give them some calmness, and they like the crystals, so I could do that, right?
Mhm.
But I've also been practicing for 31 years, right? I also have a lot more freedom, and I work in an academic
Mhm.
institution, and or I coach lawyers and that kind of stuff. Now, depending
Yep.
on who I'm coaching, I may or may not wear this. Depending if I'm doing a CLE, I may not have everything all over the place. So
Sure.
how, if somebody's in a bigger firm or working for someplace else like that,
Mhm.
do you tell them to kind of put your authenticity behind, or like some people might say, just pay your dues and eventually you're going to get to the point where you can be who you are?
I think it's based on who your client is. I think when you're in the bigger firms, often your client is that partner, or it is the corporate in-house counsel, things like that. And
Hmm.
so you
Hmm.
need to think of what's going to resonate with those people. Um, and so if you're a bigger firm, you may have to dial things back a little bit. You may not be quite as free. Now, I think the more you go, the more you are comfortable with yourself, the more you know comfortable the clients are and things like that with you. You kind of people will kind of start overlooking some of that, 30 years. And if you've got,
Mhm.
clients that love you, they're not going to care what you wear, like you show up in a
Right.
t-shirt and that's great or whatever. But I think some of
Right.
it is kind of this being socially aware of what is going to work with that setting. You may have to wear a shirt and tie and a suit jacket, for instance, if you are doing with in-house counsel all the time. Like if that's who you're working for a bank, let's say, you're going to have to
Mhm.
fit whatever they're expecting of you. If you want to be able to get that work and to be able to connect with those people. But the more you work with them, I think you're going to find the individuals are people too, and they're no longer going to care as much about did he wear a tie this day or not, and you can kind of make it a little bit more
Right.
relaxed. So I guess maybe start a little more conservative to begin with, and then as things you get more comfortable with them, maybe you can open it up a little bit more as you go.
Okay. So you are an authentic person that talks a lot about balance and work-life balance. Is there such a thing though? I kind of think that work-life balance is BS. I don't believe that there's such a thing as work-life balance. And I say this controversially. I said this years ago when it was blasphemous to say this, and I still believe it. And the people talk about work-life integration, and there's a different way to look at that. I mean, work-life integration could mean I'm working from home all day, and I can be working at 11 o'clock at night. I can work at 1 o'clock in the morning. I can work at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think sometimes the worst thing from working at home is that you're never really off. So, does work life balance or work
Mhm.
life integration exist? And if so, what is the secret? Because I don't know it. Do
So
tell.
well, no, I wish I knew secrets like this too, but I don't. So I think the concept of work-life balance is a problem because it makes it feel like you've got work and you've got life, and they're two sides of this, and you're trying to balance it out. Really, you've got your life, and I'll have a little diagram. Is just a big circle. Your life is a big circle, and work is just a
Mhm.
small part. And inside that, with work, you've got your personal life, maybe your family, your friends, spirituality, maybe volunteering if there's causes and things like that that are important to you. All the other aspects of your life are inside this big ball, and you have to, each of these aspects grow and they shrink a little bit, and they all kind of have to fit in there. And so it's not that life and work are separate; it's that work is part of your life. So then the question is, how do I keep that work from overshadowing everything else? And the secret, as far as I can tell, is boundaries.
Mhm.
Is knowing what's important to you in your life. If your family is important, then you need to make sure that you always have that part of your life present, that you're not allowing things to get into that part. If you've got a volunteer mission, you like to have a cause that you like to help with or work with, if that's important to you, you need to create boundaries around that so that work, because work will take over the rest of your other parts of your life if you allow it.
Yeah.
Um, Make sure you keep those walls there so that you can, realize that, what, work's going to try to push on everything. And so part of it's being aware of that fact, but it's kind of being strict with those boundaries of what's important to me. And if it's important, I have to maintain a separation here, because otherwise, like I said, work will take over all of it if you don't. That's the
So
best I
you
can
are a
do. Sorry.
proud lawyer dad. That's fantastic. If you could solve the problems of this thing, then you probably could give up working altogether and make a ton of money selling the solution. But you're a proud
Working
lawyer
on it,
dad, and
getting
you
there.
post pictures of your you post pictures of your family, and you post pictures of your daughter a lot on LinkedIn. What made you decide to do that? Because there's some people who go on LinkedIn, and I don't see you on other platforms. So if you are there, I don't see you there. But LinkedIn was and is to still some extent a professional platform. I think I saw a
Mhm.
change around the time of COVID when everybody was stuck inside with their families and they figured, okay, maybe I need to be an actual human being. But you often post about family issues and you use it to, I think, talk about life lessons for lawyers.
Mhm.
When did you start doing that? Why do you do that? And you do it because you want to educate? Do you do it because it helps you get business? What makes you feel comfortable uh, being so personal about your life on LinkedIn or in social media in general?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is pretty much exclusively where I post things at this point. There's just too much distraction elsewhere with all the other social media platforms.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think for me, for the people that I care about for networking purposes or whatever, LinkedIn is makes the most sense for me to be at. Um, I'm not sure when exactly it was that I started kind of posting, talking about my daughter, probably within the last year or two. So I think it's probably been since COVID and everything else kind of opened up a little bit more about those sort of situations. But again, it really for me goes back to authenticity. Um, my daughter is a really and my family is a really big part of my life, and I know in the
Hmm.
past when I started practicing, my work was kind of overshadowed everything else. And once my
Right.
daughter was born, I really tried to change how I allocated my time, my attention. Like for a few years, I had Daddy Day. So every week, excuse me,
Hmm.
one day a week, I would take off completely and spend with my daughter. And we do things like we go to the zoo
Oh,
or we go to the park. We'd have a picnic lunch or do things like that. So we get out and we do things together. And that came to be my favorite day of the week, spending time with her.
oh.
And as she's gotten older, now she's in school, so I unfortunately don't have those days anymore.
Hmm.
But I still appreciate her importance in my life and the lessons that actually I get to learn from her. Our kids are some of our greatest teachers, and there's a lot of things that I can learn from interacting and watching her, that I apply to my own life. And so I want to be able to take these lessons that I learn and help others also learn them as well. Be able to share those with people who I think could benefit, particularly people that are lawyers themselves, and our dads, because I think being a dad and a lawyer are often not talked about in the same sentence. We
Right.
may talk about our
Absolutely.
kids a little bit, and then we talk all about our law career, but we don't necessarily talk about
Hmm.
how do we balance the two. There's a
Right.
lot of mothers that are talking about it, and that's awesome. Like they're trying to talk about the struggles and how they're working with it, and we need to have more conversations like that. But we don't have those for dads, and so um, I want it to become normal to talk about how we balance the family, how we make sure that we are not having work overshadow family time and spend time with our kids. How we're not missing out on all their activities, their soccer games, their piano recitals, because we've got one more thing we have to do at the office. And, we come home late and they're in bed or whatnot. We're missing dinners. Like, how do we create a life that is balanced and that we can spend time with the people that are most important to us? And so that's kind of why I started talking about it. And again, just being authentic, because that's a big part of my life as well. Um, and so that's why you got lots of pictures of my daughter. So.
So, if you had to guess, what would be maybe two or three really important lessons that your daughter has taught you that you felt that it was important to send out to the world?
Oh gracious! So there's so many lessons
Mhm.
that she's taught
And
me.
how old is your daughter, to be clear, just so people have an idea, because they don't get to see the pictures. Although you should follow Brad on LinkedIn, and we're going to put your link in the show notes. But
Definitely
how old is
should.
she?
Yeah, she is 7 right now. She is in
Mhm.
second grade.
So,
She
what
will
are the
be 8
lessons
here
you've
this
learned from a
summer.
7-year-old? What are the lessons from the
Yeah,
second
which
grader?
I thought about making that hashtag, but I'm like, but I'm gonna run out of that here in about a year. So we decided to get. But so one of the big lessons I've learned from just interacting with her being her dad is patience. Um, you know, I have ways that I see things that I think I like the
Hmm.
things done, and she doesn't always have the same view of them. She doesn't work at the same speed necessarily that I do of things. I tell her to have her room cleaned. It takes her a couple hours to pick up a few things off the floor, and so I have to learn to be
Hmm.
patient with her because I know she's kind of on her own pace. She's on her own path, and along with that is the lesson of allowing and not and trying to surrender and control. I think as
Yes.
lawyers, and I know I've had this problem in the past of wanting to be able to control everything. Like I want something to look a certain way. I want this to happen
Hmm.
this way and that way, the way that I think is best. And when you have a kid, it just goes out the window. Like
Right.
they're going to do the way things they want to. Like they're not going
Hmm.
to follow things the way that you think they should. And for me, it's been a really eye opening experience to learn the lesson of getting rid of that control, just allowing things to happen as they do. And part of being patient with her, and you know what, everything's going to turn out fine, and just kind of allowing things to happen that way.
Wonderful. So you're also very open, since authenticity is the buzzword of the day. You are authentically and unapologetically spiritual on LinkedIn and on your own new podcast. So talk about
Mhm,
how that became. So there's a hashtag lawyers who woo, like WOO. So
mhm,
and I feel like lawyers are the least likely people to ever talk about spirituality publicly, much less on a podcast or on a forum like LinkedIn. There's I just finished a book chapter called Coming Out of the Spiritual Closet from Lawyer to Light Worker. Because for a long time when I was on LinkedIn, I was like, I'm going to post about this legal thing and this award and this presentation, this CLE. And they started talking about, my chakras on my arm and other stuff. And all of a sudden people started paying attention and felt comfortable talking
mhm,
about doing ayahuasca. People like, that's so interesting. And then a whole bunch of lawyers
mhm.
DM'd me like, I did it too. But they would never say it, they're reaching out. When did you do it? How many times? Did you try psilocybin? It's like, who are you? Who are these people? Right. So I feel like there's a
Right.
whole group, and maybe it's not just lawyers, but people in professional services, compliance people,
Mhm,
bankers, auditors, realtors, people that we have to have the image, like you said, of being in control, of knowing things, of always having
mhm,
our heads on straight. But you've got a salt lamp behind you, which isn't so
mhm.
woo woo because lots of people have them for decorative purposes. You just talked
Sure.
about burning sage. I see you
Mhm.
on your, with the crystals on the podcast. So
Yep.
and you're a guy. So not that being spiritual is a feminine thing,
That's
but it's a
right.
lot easier. It's a lot easier for women to come out and women to have pretty
Mhm.
crystal jewelry on and that kind of stuff. And by the way, I wore this just for you today, so I can
Oh, I
I can
appreciate that. Thank you.
talk about the crystals. But it's important because right,
Yeah.
you know, some people might say, okay, if I'm talking to the CEO of Goldman Sachs, do I want to have all this stuff on? But as we talk about LinkedIn, a profile where things last forever, and your podcast where things last forever,
Mhm.
what's the message that you're trying to send, and how did you get to being so comfortable being a lawyer who woos or somebody comfortable talking about their spirituality?
So it goes back to just being comfortable, being authentic. Um, there are, I mean, again, there's no such thing as being a lawyer or what a lawyer is like. Each person has their own personalities, things that we like. Um, there's lawyers out there who love to go dirt bike racing on the weekends. There's professionals that like to do all these other things that we may say, oh, kind of goes against this idea of what we see as a lawyer or an
Hmm.
accountant or a doctor, whatever like that. But that's who they are. That's the things that they enjoy, and you shouldn't be ashamed of the things that you enjoy. Um, and maybe feel bad about it. And so, a lot of the reason why I talk about it, the reason why I did the podcast, is because I want
And the name of the
lawyers.
podcast is?
Yes, that's true. The name of the podcast is Walking a Spiritual Path, and I do it
Hmm.
with a co-host who is a CPA. So again, two very, very conservative type of professions.
Hmm.
Um, but just to let people know that it's okay. You can be in a very conservative type profession like the law or accounting or being a doctor or an engineer, and you can still have these things that maybe people would think are a little off the mainstream. And the more I kind of share these things, and the more and the people like, oh yeah, they showed they're interested, or I do this too. You hear more people talk about or be interested in it, the more,
Hmm.
I guess, emboldened you kind of feel about being able to share it, because you realize that, hey, there are other people out there who are in the same boat. And I agree that there are a lot more women talking about this than men. And so that's another reason why,
Hmm.
my co-host is another guy. We wanted that guys to feel safe talking about this stuff, that this is not something to hide, that they need to be ashamed of.
Right.
I mean, you don't have to broadcast to the world if you don't want, but you shouldn't feel bad about the fact that you think, that, having crystals, it can, maybe make you feel better, you know, or,
Hmm.
that there's something to do with this energy stuff that people talk about, there's nothing wrong with that. And I want people to feel comfortable, feeling that way, and then be able to have conversations and talk about it like we're doing now, or like we do in the
Hmm.
podcast.
Right. So I want to ask this though. You've talked a lot about being authentic and living to your values, but you and I have been in the game for a while. It's easier for us. We have a little bit more credibility. We've done some things. What do you say to the person who's coming out of law school or maybe 2, 3 years out of school? or maybe somebody who's 30 years out of school but would never think about how do you even know who your authentic self is before you can get comfortable putting it out there? How do you get comfortable knowing who that is?
Yeah, you've got to be comfortable with yourself first, and that probably means sitting down and just thinking about what are the things that you like to do, um, what what seems right to you. Like, if you think that the crystals is right for you, or you're very religious, or whatever it might be, what really makes you who you are, what's important to you. I oftentimes have people, when I work with them, do an exercise with values. So I have them go
Mhm.
through and I have them list what are your most important values. A lot of times it's family, it could be, being a business owner, entrepreneur, helping others, things like that. But really take the time to sit down and figure out what is it that you think is important, that you find important in your life. Why do you think that you're here? Is it to make money? Is it to help others? Is it to be able to grow personally? What is it that you're here to do? And just sit with it, feel comfortable with it, because you're not going to be able to put that out there and to be able to share it out with others if you don't feel comfortable yourself. If
Right.
you feel ashamed
And I think
personally,
that's yeah. Mhm.
there's no way you can share it with others.
Right. And I'm glad. So you have the values exercise. I have my coaching clients do something similar. How hard is it for people to really understand what their real values are? Because I'm wondering, some people like, if I don't say family, does that make me look like a bad person? Maybe it is, making as much money as possible. But we talk about not judging yourself. But how do you get
Mm.
them? Do you ever have people say, I just don't even know what they are because they've been so busy doing what they think they're supposed to do that they don't even
Mm-hmm.
know who they really are? Do you ever have people
Yeah.
who come up with that? And how do you deal with that?
So in the issues that I give, I've got a sheet of, like, I don't know, 100 or so different values, and so basically I make them pick
Yep.
from those. So it's not like you're
Right.
trying to think of, well, what is my value? Do I care about this? Do I care about that?
Right.
No, I just have them. Basically anything you know that you feel aligned with in some way. We're gonna pull those off a sheet, and then we kind of narrow things down to kind of figure out which is most important to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there definitely are people who don't realize what their values are, and they're the ones, I think, who feel unsatisfied with their careers or with their lives, because their actions and what they do, the way they live, is actually not aligned with some of their values, but they don't realize it, because then they're set to think about what's really important to me. you know a lot of people might say family is really important to them, but then you look how they spend their life, and they're at work every night till 7, 8 o'clock. They regularly
Mm-hmm.
miss out on baseball games and things like that because they're busy doing
Mm-hmm.
other with work. They don't spend the time with their kids. Their kids have grown up and they've missed out on 18 years of
Right.
their lives through other things. And so my question is family really a priority for you then? Because the way you're acting, the life you've lived, isn't reflecting that. And so a lot of it is
Yeah.
just confronting what comes up and really thinking about, is that really a value of mine? You know, and if that is truly a value, if family really is something that's very important to you, then the next step is, what can I do in my life to
Mm-hmm.
make that top priority that I think that it should be? What steps do I need to take to make that happen?
Yeah. I think there is nothing more important than doing a values exercise, and I'll actually list. I'll attach a copy of my value sheet into the show notes for people who are listening, because I've had coaching clients who say, "I'm going to go and I'm going to get this new job," and I said, "But let's talk about how it aligns with your values, and let's talk about it.
Mhm.
What are your must-haves, nice to haves, and can't haves? Because sometimes we don't think about what we can't have, and if you don't know what your values are, then for example, if family is one of your values, and spending time and being at dinner, 4 out of the 7 days a week with your family is important, then if you're looking for a job that's got a 50% travel, that doesn't align with your values. You shouldn't even look at
Mhm.
that job, right? And I think so
Right.
many times we're thinking about, but it's a great job, it's a great company, and we forget what the values are. And then we get there and we're miserable. And we
Yep.
focus so much on what everybody should want, whether you're a lawyer, a banker, auditor, it doesn't matter. This, I should be working for big law, or I should be working for this accounting firm, or I should be, going into the family business. Maybe you want to be a surfer, and that's what you want to do, and that's okay. But until you're
Sure.
comfortable and until you know, You can't do it. And so I know my values. They're
Hmm.
really, really specific. I got my value statement. And for
Hmm.
me, it's so my guiding principle that if it's not aligned with the values, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no. There's no in between. Right. And again,
Yeah,
easier for me, 31 years of practice
sure.
doing everything I do, I love. I know that many people aren't in that situation, but at least it's something to think about. So if you're a law student
Yeah.
or graduating from business school or medical school or whatever it is, and you're thinking, I'm about to start this new job, you've got to do that values thing first because you've got to see
Hmm.
where am I going to thrive? Where am I not going to thrive? Because yes, everybody's going to be working hard no matter what you're doing. In a small firm, you're working very hard. You're working for the government, you're working hard. But you can work hard and still love it and still have the passion if it's something where you feel that your values are respected and you're aligned
Hmm.
and you're around like-minded people. Or if you're not around like-minded people, at least they leave you alone, don't make you feel crazy for having certain kinds of values.
Sure.
Right? Because I mean, you can have a manager, a boss that like, yeah, I'm sure you want to go to that soccer game, but please make sure that you're accessible by phone for the conference call. Then you're giving
Hmm.
that's that work-life balance that doesn't exist. I'm on the conference call, I'm on the Zoom call, and I've got like one eye looking at my kid, making sure they don't score a goal, right? And
Right.
I used to be that person. I would sit there and go to my son's honor roll ceremonies. I'm like, all right, they finished his name. You see me, we take a picture, and I'm out. I'm not waiting for the rest. I'm
Right.
not waiting to go talk to the teacher because I've got to go back to work. So I felt like I
Hmm.
was living with my values, but in reality, my priority was getting back to work. My
Yep.
priority was making sure my son could see me, that I was there, that I looked like a good mom, but I wasn't really
Yeah, the
fully there because
appearances.
I was on my, at the time, BlackBerry. I was on the BlackBerry looking up, as I
Mhm.
call his name yet? Okay, great, yahoo! And then I left, right?
Yeah.
And there's millions of parents out there thinking the same thing. So if you don't have,
Hmm.
and by the way, you might have to do that for a little while. We're not going to say like, well, if it doesn't align with your values, don't do it because again, people have bills to pay. But you've got to think about, is that sustainable? You might be able to do that for a year or
Hmm.
two, but if it's 20 years in, and like you said, you've missed all your kids' important events, or maybe not kids, maybe you're a caretaker, right? And like
Sure.
I'm not able to take care of my family or my family members, or
Hmm.
my dog, whatever it is. Maybe my value is I want
Yeah.
to travel the world. Then you probably shouldn't work
Hmm.
for a company where you can't ever travel. But we're so
Right.
focused on I've got to get this job with this degree with this amount of money that we put our values secondary. I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, it's the word
So
should, and that's why I really tell
it's the
people
should.
get rid of it out of your vocabulary because shoulds are expectations, and oftentimes those expectations are ones of other people, and half the time they're not even like ones that they really have. There's one we've made up we think that they have on us,
Right.
but we're living our lives based on what we think others want, as opposed to what we actually
Mm.
truly want ourselves.
Right. Well, one of the things I love about you is that you always inspire me and other people on LinkedIn. What's a book or a song or a mantra or a movie that really inspired you, that kind of changed your life? That if somebody said, I want to be just like Brad or something else, what, so
Don't
I
do
may
that.
not.
Don't want to be just like
Don't
Brad.
do
No.
that. Okay. Just like Mike. But how do you, or what is it that inspired you that kind of helped shape you? I guess you can just pick one. You don't have to, because I know people can't
Oh
think of
my.
just one. But if there is one book, song, mantra, movie that really shaped you, what would it be?
That is a really tough question because I don't. There's not just necessarily one thing. I mean, you are the culmination of all your experiences, and so you
Hmm.
grab a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that all kind of goes together, and how it's melded together really makes up who you are and kind of your
Okay.
personality and the way that you look at the world.
Hmm.
Because after all, your reality is based on your experiences, and it's different than the next person's reality. Mine's different than yours because of our
Right.
experiences and
Right.
things. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I can't think off the top of my head like a book necessarily or anything like that
Mm,
specifically that would just lots of
that's
different
okay.
things. I like the Kabbalion is one thing that I've gone through and read,
Hmm.
and there's some really good things
Hmm.
in there.
Hmm.
The Four
Love that.
Agreements is another one
Hmm.
by Don Miguel Ruiz is another good book.
See, now you're coming up
Um,
with some.
yeah, so just but again, just bits and pieces of things together, um, and just kind of you know, there's where everything kind of melds, I guess.
And we'll put some links in those to the show notes. I know I listen to the Kabbalion because you can hear a recording of it on YouTube, and sometimes I'll fall asleep listening to it at night. And these things get into your subconscious, and it helps. And the Four
Hmm.
Agreements, another one that I love.
Yep.
Final question I'm going to ask you: Do you have either a morning or an evening routine that no matter how tired you are, like, you might not brush your teeth before you go to bed, but you're definitely gonna do this. Or you wake up in the morning and like, I cannot start my day till do this. Because by the way, not everybody needs to have a morning routine. So I ask all my guests this question, right? And
Hmm.
some people might be like, nope, I don't have one. And that's fine because I feel sometimes there's this pressure that, team no sleep, get up at 5 a.m., then watch the sunrise, then meditate, then breathe, and then do this, and then you can start your day. But do you have
Hmm.
anything that helps you get through the day that if you don't do it, you just don't feel right?
So for me, every morning, when I sit down at my desk before I turn my computer on, really before I look at my phone and emails, all that kind of stuff, I have a journal, and I write in the journal
Hmm.
three things every morning that I'm grateful for. Whatever that might be for that day, whatever kind of pops in my head. If I can't think of something, I'll sit here for maybe for a couple of minutes and what are some things I'm grateful for? The people who pave the roads, the fact that I can walk,
Hmm.
that I have clean air to breathe in abundance, whatever it might be. So I write three things out every morning. And that really helps me kind of get focused on being grateful for the day. And then I write down, how will I help someone today? Because I want to be in the mindset of being grateful and being of service to others. And those are kind of where I want it to go as my basis then for the rest of the day.
I love it. So let's close with this. Who are the people that you help and how can they get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
So, in my law practice, I help people who are looking to buy or sell small businesses, small mid-sized businesses, or if they're looking to buy into a franchise. Generally, I do
Mhm,
people here in Ohio, where I'm located. That's where I'm licensed. Um, but elsewhere, I do help lawyers. So I help lawyers really be happier with their practices, generally solo, small firm
mhm,
lawyers. A lot of times it's going to be lawyer dads. So,
mhm,
guys who don't feel like they're spending the time they want with their family. That's a priority for them, or they think it's a priority, it's a value, but they just can't figure out how do I make this work. And it's
mhm,
helping them design their practice to allow them to have that so that they can um, focus and spend that time on what's really important, on what
mhm.
those values are that we've worked on and figuring out. So,
And I love that because they're so it's unfortunate, but in many firms, big and small, males are at the top of the hierarchy. And to the extent that
mhm,
males who are also fathers can start to get those values trickling down, that means that the associates can say, oh, wait, I can go to my kid's softball game, or I can go to the dog park, or I can go see my
mhm,
grandmother in the nursing home and the partner is not going to look down on me. So I think,
right.
I know we both have the same mission to help change the profession. And
Mhm.
I think what you're doing is so incredibly important in dealing with the lawyer dads. So what's the best way to reach you?
The best way to reach me is probably through LinkedIn. I'm there pretty much every day talking about all kinds of
Mhm.
different stuff and helping lawyers. So,
Fantastic. And we'll put the link for you to LinkedIn in the show notes. So, Brad Miller, thanks so much for being with us, for sharing the importance of authenticity, being a lawyer dad, having your sage burgeoning in the background, and making people free to be themselves, especially the males in the profession. So, thanks a lot
yeah.
and stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks again, Brad. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode. If you like what you heard, subscribe and share it with others.